So let's talk about how a buildup of sugar dust led to this massive explosion you see behind me. Yep, it's whiteboard time. So, in the Georgia Sugar Refinery, it was a refinery that made sugar. They had 3 separate silos, silo 1, silo 2, silo 3. Each of these 3 silos had sugar stored into them at various levels. It doesn't really matter what the level was. As they emptied, so the sugar would come down from the top, fall into the silos, and then it would come down. So it would come down in here, would fall into the silos like this, gather in the bottom here, and then it would drop down these chutes right here onto this conveyor belt here. Same thing here, there'd be a conveyor belt here, would drop it down in the silos, it would build up here, and then when they needed it, they would drop down here onto this silo, fall down like this, right? And then this conveyor belt, which went this direction, would take it and travel it off into the packing area, which is off whiteboard that way. So, for approximately 80 years, this whole system right here was completely open inside the building. This, if you dropped sugar down here, it came off on the conveyor belt here, and if, I don't know, debris from the ceiling or somebody spit from up here on a walkway or whatever, it would fall down, it could land directly in the sugar. Like, if random dude is up here on a workbench and he's like, ooh, I'm gonna spit in the sugar, and just spit, it would land directly in the sugar below. And in 2007, between 8 to 6 months before the explosion, they realized, hey, we probably shouldn't be able to have random people spit in our sugar that we're selling to people. So what we're going to do is we are going to take this entire conveyor belt and we are going to enclose it. And that's what they did. They enclosed this conveyor belt. They left openings here, enclosed it, and enclosed it all the way down until it was flush on the floor. They also added hatches in the sides so that they could be cleaned, but then the hatches were closed. So it was a fully contained system. There were no explosion doors or anything like that. So for 80 years, whenever this conveyor belt would have its sugar fall down on it and it would get conveyed out that way, naturally, if you deal with sugar, it creates dust. In addition, as the sugar was falling out of the silo, it would fall off the sides onto the ground, and it would build up in little piles, and every once in a while they'd come through and sweep it up and throw it away or do whatever they did with the sugar that ended up on the floor. I don't really want to think about that one that hard. Anyway, once this encasement was built, they still had the same problem. As the sugar falls down, it would still create dust in this area, all in this area, except now, instead of having the dust come all the way up and all the way around and all of that, it was in a very confined space. As this continued to happen, it's highly unlikely that they ever actually cleaned this conveyor belt area. Based on numerous photographs of other locations in the plant prior to the explosions, I should say, they were very dusty. In the previous video I mentioned there was one man who reported that every day he would have to get a squeegee to squeegee his way to his workstation because otherwise it was slippery and unsafe to walk to his location. And you should never have to squeegee your way to your location unless you work in a place that has a lot of water and is supposed to have a lot of water. Anyway, so all of this dust built up in this container. And eventually, this dust falls over the portion of it, and one of these bearings that runs along these conveyor belts, likely, we don't really know the exact cause. This is just my personal opinion. It feels the most accurate. There's a couple potentials, but this one feels the most accurate. It's likely that one of these bearings, let's just say it's this one, started to wear out and started to get hot. And as it gets hot and hot and hot, there's a pile of dust sitting on the ground next to it that has fallen off of this conveyor belt as it moves. So it's all sitting right here. And as this conveyor belt gets hotter and hotter, or as this bearing gets hotter and hotter and hotter, it starts to break down this sugar. Now, generally, sugar doesn't burn all that well. However, whenever you heat something for a long period of time, it will start to release flammable gases. And eventually, it's going to work it up enough that it's going to reach its ignition point, which is going to set it on fire, which inside of this confined space is going to give you a dust explosion. What happens with a dust explosion is you have all of these little pieces of dust in the air. And one of the things that you need for fire is sufficient surface area. When you have like a piece of log and you try and burn a log, it's going to take a lot of energy from the fire to set that log on fire. However, when you have dust, it's so small that it takes a very finite amount of energy to actually ignite it. So as this ignited, all of this dust in the air was in a sufficient concentration in the air that it allowed a flame front to rapidly travel through and consume all of the dust that was in the air. But because they had enclosed this whole container, the pressure from that flame front moving through, so you have your fire, your initial flame front, as it's moving this direction, right? It's building up speed. As it hits this wall, it has nowhere to go. It can't dissipate through this wall from this steel container, so it bounces back, and it creates more pressure and more pressure and more pressure before eventually, kaboom, it explodes out of the container. Now, this whole refinery is full of sugar. So after this first explosion causes a massive shake, it shakes everything around. All of that dust that's sitting around now gets kicked up into the air and has caused significantly that flame front. As it blows this apart, all of that dust gets kicked up. It causes another explosion, which kicks up dust in a different part of the refinery, which causes another explosion, kicks up dust in a different part of the refinery, and so on and so on and so on, until you have 15 minutes straight of explosions all over this refinery. Now, the other potential causes in this area, so we have our heated bearing, which feels like the most likely, and I think that is likely the most cause. The other option is there was the potential that someone was smoking in the area. However, no one was found in this area, and with how quick this would have gone off, they would not have been found in a different area. They would have been dead in this location. The other one is friction. Generally, it's a little bit more difficult to get friction. It seems most likely that the bearing failure is the most common, or most likely, I should say. Anyway, if you want context for how long 15 straight minutes of explosions in a single building is, you would have to watch this video twice because it's about 7 minutes long.